Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on 3 doors to knowledge, and next week the topic will be the 6 darshanas. Please also note that we meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. Our lodge, United Lodge of Theosophists, is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The sole bond between its associates is the basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists and the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, it belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna. A man is said to be confirmed in spiritual knowledge when he forsaketh every desire which entereth into his heart, and of himself is happy and content in the self, through the self. His mind is undisturbed in adversity. He is happy and contented in prosperity, and he is a stranger to anxiety, fear, and anger. Such a man is called a muni, when in every condition he receives each event, whether favorable or unfavorable, with an equal mind which neither likes nor dislikes. His wisdom is established, and having met good or evil, neither rejoiceth at the one nor is cast down by the other. He is confirmed in spiritual knowledge when, like the tortoise, he can draw in all his senses and restrain them from their wanted purposes. The hungry man loses sight of every other object but the gratification of his appetite. And when he has become acquainted with the Supreme, he loses all taste for objects of whatever kind. The tumultuous senses and organs hurry away by force the heart, even of the wise man who striveth after perfection. Let a man restraining all these remain in devotion at rest in me, his true self. For he who hath his senses and organs in control possesses spiritual knowledge. He who attendeth to the inclinations of the senses, in them hath a concern. From this concern is created passion, from passion anger, from anger is produced delusion, from delusion a loss of the memory, from the loss of memory loss of discrimination, and from loss of discrimination loss of all. But he who, free from attachment or repulsion for objects, experienceth them through the senses and organs, with his heart obedient to his will, attains to tranquility of thought. And this tranquil state attained, therefrom shall soon result a separation from all troubles, and his mind being thus at ease, fixed upon one object, it embraceth wisdom from all sides. The man whose heart and mind are not at rest is without wisdom, or the power of contemplation. Who doth not practice reflection hath no calm. And how can a man without calm attain happiness? The uncontrolled heart, following the dictates of the moving passions, snatcheth away his spiritual knowledge, as the storm the bark upon the raging ocean. Therefore, O great armed one, he is possessed of spiritual knowledge, whose senses are withheld from objects of sense. What is night to those who are unenlightened is as day to his gaze. What seems as day is known to him as night, the night of ignorance. Such is the self-governed sage. The man who desires enter his heart, as waters run into the unswelling passive ocean, which, though never ever full, yet does not quit its bed, obtaineth happiness, not he who lusteth in his lusts. The man who, having abandoned all desires, acts without covetousness, selfishness, or pride, deeming himself neither actor nor possessor, attains to rest. This, O son of Pritha, is dependence upon the Supreme Spirit, and he who possesses it goes no more astray. Having obtained it, if therein established at the hour of death, he passeth on to nirvana in the Supreme. And now for today's talk.
Thank you, friends. To such knowledge as Krishna and Jesus had, and as the seeds of which we all have, there are doors which each one has for himself to open, for they are within himself. The first is the door of the open mind. That kind of an open mind, like a pipe that lets everything good run through and everything solid settle. That kind of an open mind which recognizes its own ignorance and is not only willing to learn, but desirous of learning, and knows that anybody who comes within its ken may perchance be the keeper of the keys to the gates of gold. An open mind is the first of the doors by which one may reach into the recesses of his own consciousness and come to the realization of his own immortality. The second, the door of the pure heart. What knowledge that is gained must be used the best one knows how. One who has an open mind is on the beginning of the road to unselfishness, unselfish thinking. The religionist looks at nothing without his own particular religious spectacles. His mind is closed to anything except what comes to him through those lenses. We must remove any such spectacles we may be wearing, and otherwise be willing to pay the price of knowledge. We must test what we know or think we know. Test what we believe. Put it to the proof. We are willing to have unselfishness practiced on us, which shows that we know it is a good thing, yet we are afraid to practice unselfishness on others. To put it to the proof. If unselfishness is a bad rule of life, we should throw it away and be selfish. Selfishness and unselfishness cannot both be good rules of action. Purity and impurity cannot both be good rules of action. How can one know anything about high living and pure thinking, whose daily mental pablum is in worldly trivia, an addiction to cell phones that disrupt deep searches for truth. We would not think of putting the kind of food into our stomachs that we put into our minds. So we get the results of bad and impure mental diet. If one's mind were open to listen or willing to compare, one would be astonished to see how much he has counted a value that is worthless. He would replace the worthless with better ideas. Then, if his heart is pure, when he finds he has more knowledge in any given direction than his neighbor, he will use it for the joint benefit. Door 3 is an eager intellect. Then suddenly one becomes almost delirious with desire, not to test others out, but to test out one's own mental content, to keep sifting one's own thoughts, ideas, knowledge, actions, feelings, and relations to others. He is eager to get a clean and pure mind and heart. That constitutes the ardent soul. And then the gates of intuition open, as does the perception on this plane of the realities of another. By living the right kind of life, by taking a motherly, brotherly, and Christ-like attitude toward all beings, the doors of intuition are opened. And intuition is all we know of the power that Krishna and Christ had, and the power that we deny ourselves by not making the effort to develop that seed within us ourselves. Going back to the 3 doors, starting with the open mind, we are encouraged to fear nothing, doubt nothing, regret nothing, to go on. An adept grows or becomes. His enthusiasm does not take leave of his reasoning powers. Enthusiasm is a great dynamic. It is heat, fire, the electric energy, but like the A-bomb, it can be destructive if not directed to reasonable and constructive use. Great is the opportunity for enthusiasm in the pure and simple acts enjoined upon us by genuine Theosophy, from which we get the impression that if one lives an ordinary, decent life, he will be moving upward, even though the journey be only very gradual incline. And that the feeling of freedom from thrusting aside quavering uncertainty and making a leap of faith to exert our spiritual will enhances our confidence that we can do it consistently. To actually be on the road of necessary control, one may well start on anything: a bad habit, a useless habit, a weakness. Control one, and we discover the mechanism for controlling any. Behind will stands desire. So we must truly desire to leave a situation we wish to change. Then the will is sure to move us right if embedded with a selfless motive, the universal key to right action. We think, yet know not how thought is produced. 2 categories of thought that play a most important part in the karma of the reincarnating ego are pure thought, sometimes called meditation, and thought that energizes particular action. Meditation facilitates the dynamics of spiritual knowledge, being brought into the mind's sphere of perception. Any omission of spirit and the spiritual aspect of mind will inevitably develop a materialized psychology, inhibiting a true understanding of the nature of the energetic mind, the inner magnetic field of thought. The potentially powerful field of the inner thinker acts as a medium for transforming spiritual energy into the subtle forces of brain and nerve. The generic and ancient name given the cosmic aspect of these forces is Forhat, or called electricity, which has a potential relative to each of the 7 planes of being, and in its multiple aspects creates the connecting links between the modes of ideation on these planes. There is a direct connection between the deep sleep consciousness of spirit and the dream state. The egoic realities of the spiritual state are stepped down into corresponding symbols of the dream state. Then, in the waking state, these dream pictures reveal their meaning through the intuitive powers. Divorce occult energy and intelligence, and the result will always be a mechanistic conception of the brain's activities, devoid of any moral or ethical relation. The limitations of each mind determine the extent of the field in which its energies may expand. The source of mental energy is exhaustless, and there are few limits to its possible use. It radiates from the one life, which is the basis of all individual lives, and the capacity for its use is limited only by the vehicle which man himself wills. A period of rest is necessary for adjustment after the intake of energy, as it follows also the expenditure of energy with cyclic precision. Sleep is needed to allow the body to absorb the excess energy developed during waking activity. Periods of action and rest may succeed each other in almost imperceptible cycles, causing the untrained mind to fly from subject to subject, from point to point, until a saturation of energy is reached. The one-pointed mind is a mind able to insulate the energy generated by an idea against its dissipation in the field of associated ideas, the brain's storage of memory. During the rest periods, synthesizing intelligence utilizes this energy to adjust the idea to its proper associations. This is the basis for the mental phenomenon so often noted that causes the solution of a problem to enter the consciousness like a flash. The sequence may be as follows. There is establishment of an idea in the field of mind, followed by a period of intense exercise upon the idea, such as research affords, then a period of rest, after which the synthetic idea, now itself a secondary archetype, is formulated as a new and basic center for mental activity. Mental deposits carried from life to life are the sensitized reactions to ideas. These lie in two categories: those produced by reflection or thought on the plane of ideas, and thought coincident to action on the plane of the physical man. They remain as subtle deposits in the soul's memory, seeds to fructify in future incarnations. Although the mind principle remains constant, there is a new working mind for each incarnation. Seeds of former minds are its basis and cause. So it is new only in the sense that, under karma, causes are reassembled in a fresh pattern of action. No matter how intense the devaconic bliss may have been, the reincarnating ego has to meet both physical and mental effects of causes created by former activity in a body. To these effects is due the initial development of the personality, for karma is so integrated with mental deposits that motivation, potential reaction to environment and to affinities follows in a well-formulated trend from childhood. However, those currents due entirely to study and meditation upon the Supreme Spirit, which have produced the upsurge of spiritual knowledge within the egoic consciousness, are above the field in which karma is felt, and become the energy of the inner voice we call conscience. It is not rare to see one who, though passing through distressing physical karma, is inwardly illuminated by a light which enables others to see more clearly. Conscience is then more than a far-off voice. It may envelop the entire inner being with light on which no evil can prowl. Karma is interwoven in the very structure of the newly developing mind of each incarnation. Acting upon the several planes of being up to that of spirit, karma eventually leads each individual to seek an understanding of its processes. Karma is of the ego's own making, and therefore one must mirror himself in such a way as to be able to see and understand that which he has done and is doing to produce good or bad effects. The problem is one of long-sustained intention to cut through the wall of belief. It is not the teachings nor our experiences which fail us, but what we believe regarding them. One may study every aphorism on karma and every definition the teachings afford, and yet believe erroneously. Therefore, each reaction, in fact, should be laid aside until tested through observation and self-examination. Gradually success comes, and the ego is able to step aside to see himself wearing the karmic garments he has woven. A new sense of responsibility then awakens, and there arises a desire in the individual to willingly exhaust all karmic effects rather than to escape and forget. There can be no erroneous belief in the light of such a position. And if karma has yet to fall with heavy blows, the ego is prepared to receive them with fortitude, knowing his own has come back to him. Changes in man's nature are gradual. The karma of ages must run its course. If there appears to be a sudden turning point, it is because the karma then in action has reached its final adjustment, and new karma begins to make its effects felt. The inner perception may awaken to truth after experiencing a great sorrow, a moment of unselfish achievement, or the vibratory mind of a soul accustomed to contemplation may quietly attune itself to the spiritual plane of thought. In these ways, life itself fixes the attention upon that which belongs to the higher nature, and the unexplored spiritual environment becomes a reality. As for an open heart, addressed in the first object of the Theosophical movement is the doctrine of brotherhood. This doctrine has occult foundations rooted in natural reality. Brotherhood is an immutable law which works from within without, to shape every expression of intelligence, to define every human relation, and finally to limit all actions which are in violation of the essential unity of the human race. One who once ruled as a king may wander earth in rags for those done things and undone things. What is this king but a unit of the whole, brought under the law of karma, the law of equilibrium, to face those aspects of the oneself that in his high situation as ruler he denied or ignored. Our pain is frustration, and obstacles are to the soul the voice of the law proclaiming the order of life we have neglected. The principles of karma and reincarnation clarify what was once a mystery. They become the visible power of moral justice, impersonal, touching all, and working through the natural agencies of human experience. The overall applicability of karma and reincarnation brings a light that shows the inner connections of all events, and it elevates the individual to his true level of a creative potency in nature. Anton Mesmer and HPP point out that every principle of man's nature has its natural medium of interrelation. There is first the unity of knowledge. Each being participants in knowledge, each according to self-realization. Sages and perfect men of every age are one in their spiritual being. They become hierarchically united in manifested existence through possession of the one truth. Their hearts of will, knowledge, and compassion are the length of this great band of brothers. These great ones preserve in themselves the pattern of achievement, and so are indeed the way, the truth, and the light. Lesser men, bound by lesser unities, and revolve upon the wheel of rebirth in exact correspondence to the principles which animate their lives. As one feels toward others, so are the alliances of karma established. The sensitive soul who finds himself cast among a crowd of illiterates, coarse men, so he thinks he has nothing in common with, is thus confronted by his own higher coarseness of the past, the arrogance which made him believe he had no duty to such as they. Our feelings are hourly shaping the destiny of the human race. Yet how few there are who know that thoughts now brooded and raised in the feeling nature are predestining the paths of action in the future. Each embodied soul is a living, vibrating center, continuously emitting the unspoken attractions and repulsions of his inner life. Hearts are joined and hearts are rent asunder by these feelings. Strong souls are needed to pierce the gloom inherited from centuries of misguided feeling. A penetrating awareness of the obstacles to be overcome must guide a sympathy more profound than mere goodness or emotional religiosity. The feeling that will reach and arouse the hearts of others is rather an impersonal warmth that grows without attention and works its way without announcement. It is the field of fraternity in spirit which every earnest lover of his fellows carries about with him. Simply the resolve to see in all others the souls that once they knew but now forget will open channels of the heart. How can we tell what ancient sadness begins to dissipate under the rays of a friendly smile? What weakness is assailed once more because of some friendly encouragement founded in the soul point of view? No personal revelation is required to open the heart. One need only turn in another direction from the personal, over the head of the personality. As this becomes a habit, others will soon become far more interesting than ourselves. In this cycle, the truth will never be sought by crowds. The many will find the way only after it has been discovered and widened by the few. The brotherhood taught by genuine Theosophy is brotherhood illuminated with knowledge. The light of truth reaches into the dark corners of life and reveals the working of the law, and the reality of brotherhood thereupon becomes manifest. Discipleship is but the dawning realization of that vision of eternity. To the mind it unfolds the relative unities of all that live. To the heart it is a feeling that comes from a higher world. Like a divine descent, it shines through the eyes of mortal man, making him, for the moment, a god. It surges through him, encompassing his whole being, and unlike the psychic enthusiasms of the personality, this feeling of divine compassion strengthens the will and brings certainty to the discrimination. One who has seen the vision, if only as a dream, no more will question wearily for proofs that he has lived before, nor tax with injustice the natural order. He has reached into the soul of things, has won a glimpse of that which wise men speak of, but cannot give away. He is beginning to open his heart. As for the eager intellect, H.P. Blavatsky had that rarely found eager intellect. Nothing which came within her perceptions was unworthy of her interest. The questings of her mind were as wide as the universe. Man, his science, his art, his literature, the world of nature, all came within the scope of her searching vision. Hers was not the narrow absorption of the scientist with his special research, the artist with his art, but of one who sought to unravel the tangled skin of ignorance in which man for ages past has floundered. All the powers of her eager intellect and her fiery heart or engaged in a struggle to set men free. At last might, if he would, clearly see just what is his place in the cosmic scheme, and why, so strangely at variance with the modern ideas, he stands at the very center. We may not yet have developed the eager intellect of HPB. Nevertheless, we are all teachers whose intellects become increasingly eager as our thirst for understanding deepens our sympathies and widens the span of our interest in life, as encouraged movement away from the narrow orbit of a prescribed and routine course that revolves around personalities and things personal, and unfocused interest scattered among many things while seeking amusement, pleasure, and release from boredom. So the truly eager intellect is lighted by a fire in the heart. It is not satisfied with facts, however strange and wonderful they may appear. It probes for inner essences. Through its subtle power, the manifestations of nature are transmuted into terms of order and fundamental relationships. Nothing is outside the ken of such a mind. To it, every event in life has its due significance. Every department of nature offers new areas for its exploration. Potentially every theosophist has a magic synthesizing power resident in the use of ideas which form the fountain source of all life. Through the exercise of these ideas, the very quality of his mind undergoes a subtle transformation into an instrument which admits of no obstacles to the ever-expanding range of its vision. With such a lens, the student may look directly into the heart of nature and see what is dross, what is gold, and then he may separate the wheat from the chaff. Only an eager intellect may build such an instrument, and only through constant and fullest exercise of its power to bring light into the problems of man be fulfilled. The activities which claim our absorbed attention today must be remodeled against lines of basic, age-old truth. A new orientation and vitality must be given to our science, art, literature. Our vision must pierce the veil of obscuring facts into the realm of causes. The literature of our age is based upon sensation, reflects little of profound experience, often stoops to mediumistic drivel. The rules of modern art are firmly embedded in the psychic nature. Divorced as it is from truth and beauty, it lacks real creative inspiration and direction. Science has reaped a rich harvest in its research into the invisible material world, only to reach a complete stalemate in arriving at an understanding of causes which lie at the source of its well-catalogued phenomena. What potent potential there is if man's self-expression were inspired by recognition of man's magnificent birthright, of his place in the universe, of his responsibility in the evolution of nature. What inner fire lighted the vision of Lincoln, of Tom Paine? Was it ambition for personal power? What gave to the pen of Emerson such vital forces? Great ideas which transcend political and social systems of their day, high devotion to the service of mankind. Pitifully few have been our leaders of men, and those few have lacked the full vision that the Theosophist may have. It is in our power to solve that great riddle. Nothing short of a universal application of the truth will serve the desired needs of today. Preparation is the first step toward leadership. Fiery hearts, eager intellects, and great devotion are needed. Then we must do as the gods, when incarnated, do. We must feel ourselves the vehicles of the whole humanity and act accordingly. That ends the prepared presentation. I'd like to open the meeting now to comments, questions. Yes.
So that from your description of an open mind, can we conclude that most of our minds are not open?
Absolutely. Because we get stuck on a lot of ideas and we kind of stay there. It's very difficult to keep an open mind.
To follow up
Especially
with
in
that.
this day and age of all these things going on around us, like just distracting us. Yes.
Does the desire for learning have to be ignited like in every reincarnation, or once you open that door to knowledge, to learning, it will carry out through lifetimes?
Once you open that door, it permeates into the spiritual level. That higher part goes from life to life. That's the student's understanding. If it's a personal type of learning we're doing, a selfish type of learning, it disappears at the end of that life where the learning occurs. So it's kind of a two-edged thing there.
Can you repeat the last part, please?
The selfish material type of learning dissipates with the material side, the body, etc. It never disappears, but it goes into the elementals and so forth. So we have a future impact on the material world in that way. There's a lot of things said here.
What you described is, of course, a path to altruistic motives. But I wonder if people with not altruistic motives go through some steps for evil doings.
There is that side
Please,
of everything.
can you please repeat the
Interjection.
question? Repeat the question.
We're talking about altruistic motive, okay?
Versus
Question.
the evil.
And it has to do with, with the evil side, if you will. I don't know if you would call that altruism, but it's certainly the negative side of nature, if you will, that does go on, and we constantly try to move ourselves in a positive direction rather than what's called the dark side.
Yeah.
Thinking about Star Wars and so forth.
Even for self-interest, I think is not, we can say it's not altruistic if you're trying to acquire knowledge on the spiritual level, but for self-interest, rather than the.
Well, you probably won't do that, but you can try, but you probably, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, that was my comment.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, we'll go on a selfish personal journey, and then it could become altruistic. I think we might be able to think of instances where that happens. So the personal selfish is something that we just need to try to work on. We need to go out there and act and do what we can on a day-by-day basis, and if we realize that hey, that have had a motive in there which really didn't measure up to my standard. We can work on that motive for the future, and the transformations occur. Yes.
Well, according to this student's understanding, from the writings, it is stated that when your motive is for general good, you have access to those ideals and ideas that will bring the knowledge to you. But HPB says, if you, for any reason, on the way, change your attitude or motive to personal, that spiritual energy will depart, and you will end up with psychic energy, which is exactly the opposite of spiritual energy.
Exactly.
You said that the spiritual energy is fohat, where that electrical energy that enables you instantaneously to absorb knowledge would not assist you in motives that are selfish, personal, and guided towards gain. It will punish you, in fact.
Well, you stated it from that standpoint. We start out with an impersonal motive, and it becomes personal later on. And I think
Or
we
opposite,
are all
you can
attempting.
start with personal and go
Yeah.
impersonal, and then it will come to your aid. But if your motive is not to help generally others,
Yeah.
because you're only part of the whole, your assistance is for the whole. Once you understand and realize that reality within yourself, you really cannot change your attitude towards personal again, because it will nag you, it will nudge you, it will tell you that it isn't correct what you're doing. You cannot
Right.
escape it.
No.
It will nudge
It's
you.
interesting, the entrepreneur I was listening to, his view was very different than maybe in the past you would find somebody's in this position. He owned a company and said that his customers, if you will, are not only the stockholders in the company and so forth, but the homeless people too, because he provides a service to everyone. I mean, that's I think what we're talking about today, the selfless type idea. He knew he had to make a profit for his company, but his view of his constituents was very different than the typical one in a business trying to make money.
And going along with that, the knowledge that we're talking about is self-knowledge with a capital S.
Exactly.
Which includes everything in the universe. So you have to be altruistic, you have to be selfless to realize that self-knowledge. So.
Absolutely.
What are you going to do with it afterwards, though, is still a question. Once you obtain it, what are you going to do with it? Because
you have to culture it.
we still can fall, from the high place we achieved, because there are those examples who fell right in front of our eyes, and they were excellent students, amiable, kind, generous. They studied and they learned and they disseminated, but at the end they still fell, because that other part of us is also there. Until you kill it on each and every level of consciousness, which is the 7 principles in you, you still have it there, and it will get us if we are not watchful. It is very insidious, very subtle, and its workings actually affect the mind the greatest. We think we have arrived, we think we are doing good, and immediately we find ourselves on earth again because we weren't doing it correctly. It really is a danger. A lot of students don't realize it, but it is a tremendous danger.
That's why a pure heart is so important.
Absolutely.
So focusing on the heart.
We have within us the temptation as well as the conscience that says, don't do that, you know. And the temptation is to go ahead and do it because I'll make $1 million if I do it. I hurt a lot of people, but you know, that on the side if we don't pay. So we have to pay attention to that. And
it's in everybody.
remember always where we stand on things and try to advance humanity.
HPV says even if they're not blooming in us, the seeds are all there.
Mm-hmm.
That the key is not to allow the seed to grow, thinking that you're doing something good. In fact, you're giving into your own inner desire, personal one. Yeah, it's very difficult to differentiate between the two. Yeah.
Well, this philosopher says that in chapter of Matthew in the Bible also said Jesus has quoted Jesus as saying, "You can do greater things than I." You know, if this were not the case, then this philosophy, you know, it's following this philosophy where we have an example of a story, a person coming to this earth, perfected being, doing these great things, but then recognizing that he is part of a current, perfected himself and so forth, and out there doing good, you know. And he said we can all do it. And that's what this philosophy says. Now, I'm not sure how the biblical scholars would interpret that verse in Matthew, but that's how this student interprets it.
There was an article in one of the magazines, the Theosophical Movement, where it said that humanity today entertains itself through gossip, and that it is the most insidious way of assertion of one's own self. But it still goes on. There are people who kind of feed themselves on it.
Mm-hmm.
Their life is fed on gossip. And I think we should all read that article. They made such a valid point in it, that our energy is dissipated through that, and that we're making karma constantly by gossiping.
Very insidious thing, and it does no good.
Yeah, and this student heard a mother say, in our home when we gather for dinner, our children are not allowed to talk about other people. They're allowed to talk about what they have done and how they're going to overcome their own difficulties. I really thought that was a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we have to, you know, we have to get ourselves there and be ever mindful, because the road never ends. It's a continuous process of opportunities and challenges.
Ambition is a very...
even when we become, you know, through our self-induced and self-devised methods, we become perfected. We still have the challenges there. Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan," in a verse of the Bible. You know, those temptations are there, and we learn to overcome them. It's, you know, stay there with it. But it's a continuous process of being in a position to self-improve and help others along the way.
HPV says that, especially for Theosophical student, ambition, power, and title should mean absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That the organization itself is just a community of students who are approaching the philosophy to gain knowledge in order to help others. Mm-hmm. But she says those three should not ever come into the mind and heart of the students themselves, because she says it really demolishes our character.
And you're talking about people falling along the way
No, we're not
Theosophist.
finger pointing to
Yeah,
anybody.
I know,
we're
but
finger
invariably
pointing
when
to
you
at
find-
ourselves.
When you find, someone who falls, you find that incentive to have that power.
No,
No?
no.
We'll continue on with what your comment about no.
In regards to discarding ambition, here on the board we have eagerness, and we also have this concept of devotion.
Right.
So maybe a question to entertain or reflect is, how does eagerness and devotion, how does that contrast to ambition?
Good question. Because it seems to, on the surface almost the same, right? But
Right.
ambition has that personal tint to it. Trying to go out and do something that would hurt other people and not really care about it. That often is associated with ambition, whereas the ego intellect, the type that was spoken of today, is there, is within us to develop to try to improve all of mankind. So it's limitless, it's totally unselfish, whereas ambition is frequently very selfish.
In other words, you're saying that it contrasts in the way that ambition does not care as to whom it hurts. You go
right.
out and do it because you want to gain it.
That's right.
But on the other side, that quality is absent.
Yeah. Getting down to a very physical level, you want to get the money in your pot. You don't care about those homeless people out there.
No, but there's also going and earning money at the expense of other people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for this student, ambition has this, it reminds me of a fast way of gaining something without due, it's not
Without earning it. Yeah.
without earning it. So
Yeah.
you just want it right now without, doing your work fast, and just not trusting the law, the karma, for it to come at the right time.
In the workplace, claiming credit for something that you really shouldn't have gotten credit for. Things like that. Well, our time is just about up, and we'll be reconvening in a while for a continuation of study of the Gita and the notes. And thank you for joining us. Hope you'll be back online next week and back here as many as possible.